What's up, ladies and gentlemen? This is the DFS 5-Pack. I'm your host, Ryan Kostrowski, here with my co-host and partner in crime, Matt Bellman. So, big weekend for customers overall, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but also just coming off a really big win for you, taking down about 60 grand-ish off of a little over 2K in buy-ins today. So, congratulations. That's awesome. Congratulations to all the customers who won GPPs this weekend. We just want to take a few minutes to just kind of talk through, well, it might be more than a few minutes. You know how I like to ramble, and just talk through what goes into making MLB DFS successful and why you should start thinking about it a little bit differently than you do the other sports.
For sure. Very, humbling type experience, very exhausting experiences. Anyone who's been at, top one of those GPPs can attest to. It started Friday night, getting a little bit hot. At that point, Friday night, it was the Arizona and Boston game. A lot of the Arizona bats went off. Shows you that low-owned stacks can, really do a lot of damage, and just continued that momentum into today. And kind of the same type of thing. In baseball, there's so many different ways to skin the cat. And, one thing that you were touching on, I know that I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but you were telling me yesterday that we should make a video about how, in baseball, it's different. Stuff can change in the matter of a minute, or stuff cannot change because there's no time involved in it. And it's just such a different sport and game. And I mean, I could literally talk about 5,000 different things on this video. So I'm glad you made a presentation to kind of keep me on straight.
Yeah, it works for me too, because otherwise I have a tendency to ramble, as most of you guys know. So again, let's break down a few of these things. And the goal here is just to help you guys think about this differently, because a lot of ways I feel like I have to rein you in on football and basketball because you try so hard to be different. But I've taken the flip side of that and what you've talked about and try to apply that to my baseball game. And it has been a big help. But first off, just kind of, show what it is. You put in 22.10 today, taking out just over 60 and a few bucks, all really just coming down to the same lineup, placing first in multiple GPPs. And just to reiterate, guys, I mean, I think it is worth discussing. Like, yeah, you won a lot of money, but you play for good money. Like, you're not, one of our customers won 30 grand on Friday. Congratulations, Paul. And he did that on $9. That's not easy to do.
Big difference, man. And I'm not embarrassed or upset to bring that up, because that's part of our job and that's pertinent to bring up. I play for decent money, and it's important on days that I don't win that I'm seeing green. You're not going to see green every day, but wins like this, like we talk about, you need them to happen occasionally, and you need to see green on a regular, consistent basis aside from that. But with how these GPPs are skewed, like, you got to win one if you're playing heavy like this. You have to take one down at least occasionally.
Right, because you can see, like, I believe if you didn't get the 50, because you won by 0.1, right?
Well, actually, Tim Anderson got another late hit, so I won by 3.1. But to your point, if that doesn't happen and I fell into second place, that if George Springer, who, got a bloop double and then batted in the bases loaded with the ninth inning, walks and scores a run there, and I lose by 0.1, I mean, that's 20 grand, which is a nice day, but it's 30 grand less than what I won.
So I was bringing my kid to a birthday party. So George Springer did bat with the bases loaded in the 9th or the 10th?
Yeah, in the 9th. So I was up 7.1, and in the 8th inning, and the guy who finished in second had Springer. Springer hit a bloop double, and then scored, and then scored. So I was up 0.1. Meanwhile, right after that, Tim Anderson hit a single, so I'm up 3.1. And then in the 9th inning, in the tie game, the Astros load the bases with one out. Springer comes up, and he strikes out. I mean, if he does anything there, because I'm up 3.1, if he walks, I'm losing by 0.1 or whatever it is, by 0.9, and then Altuve walked to score the game-ending run. So I was like,
can I assume that you had to go through a change of underpants while he was up?
Dude, there were so many things that happened today that we always talk about this too, and a lot of people, when they win, don't want to admit this, but so many things had to work out right for me to win today. Like, so many things. I mean, not the least of which is Gary Sanchez hitting 3 home runs at 10%.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be a big help. So you can kind of see most of his lineup right there. Just to fill us in, who was the outfielders again? I'm pretty sure you had Yelich.
No, so this is another great point. I had Brett Gardner, I had Aaron Judge, and I had Robbie Grossman. So how baseball is it that my best player and the guy I love today was Aaron Judge? He had 2 points. He was the worst guy on my roster by far. and he was the most expensive guy on the entire slate and the most expensive guy on my roster. Couldn't get any more baseball than that, except maybe going to Robbie Grossman, who I used because he was 3,300 and leading off. And I stacked Cardinals in another lineup without Matt Carpenter, but I wanted to use Matt Carpenter a one-off elsewhere, and him and Robbie Grossman fit with my Yankee stack and my favorite play of the slate, Tim Anderson. So it just fell all together today. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I actually had a decent lineup, nothing like this. I don't play for as big of money, and I didn't get first. I got 22nd out of, I think it was like 1,300 or something like that. And I had the Grossman Judge combo as well, and Judge did nothing. I mean, I think he had the 2 points, and then Grossman was phenomenal, and I just kind of landed on him as well. So weird coincidence, because we didn't talk this slate out at all. We didn't even bring it up to each other, and it just so happens that we had the same combo of guys. And Aaron Judge, who, how could you not like a little bit at least every day?
Right?
Could do anything. And Grossman was, he was very good.
Grossman was very good.
So I want to bring this up because this is what we talk about. Whereas, NBA and NFL has always kind of been a bread and butter of mine. You like MLB DFS. And I think the best way to phrase this for hopefully most people to understand it is it's the same thing with like the college basketball tournament versus a best of 7 series. In a best of 7 series, the best team usually wins. In a one-game win-or-go-home type of situation, that doesn't always happen. In baseball, Mike Trout can be lined up against an absolute joke of a left-handed pitcher, but he might only get 1 to 2 at-bats against that guy. Then they might bring in, a submarine right-hander to face him that he has struggles with. So it's a very small sample size. But if Ezekiel Elliott goes up against the worst run defense in the NFL, yeah, he might have a bad quarter, but at the end of the day, he probably has 100 yards, a touchdown, has a couple of receptions. It is almost always going to be good. It doesn't work the same way in baseball, in the same like or basketball. If James Harden has no CP3 and he's on the road against the Pelicans in a tight game, he's going to ball 9 times out of 10. But that doesn't work the same way in baseball. If Mike Trout, Christian Yelich, Paul Goldschmidt, they only hit a home run every 15 at bats, or they only get hits 30% of the time. So it's a very small sample size, and that's why it pays to be different.
Most definitely. In baseball, it's almost like, I know a lot of people talk about stacking because they want to, you want to pick on that opposing pitcher. And that is true. And that's part of it for me. But that's not the only reason. I like stacking because of that. But also because what you just talked about, in order to succeed in baseball, you need the guys on your team to be good. In basketball, you don't need that. In football, you don't need that. And when I say, you need in order to be really good in baseball, I'm talking about like winning a GPP, not talking about cash games. That's when you're talking about getting big scores from mostly everyone on your team. And when you stack a team, it's just more likely to happen, as opposed to like you just talked about Trout, who's in a really good spot. He might only get 1 or 2 at-bats against that guy, and they might be with no one on base, and they might have 2 bad strike calls in that at-bat, and then all of a sudden he's 0 for 2 going against the best right-handed reliever in the game or whatever it is.
And it might not be his fault. He might hit the ball hard right at somebody. Shit happens.
Yeah, exactly. Baseball is just such a different game. As much as we talk about it, I still don't think it gets enough, justice, around the industry on any single day. Like for me, and you have to pick your spots. You can't just be different all the time just to be different. But on DraftKings slates, you could almost make a case for, playing anyone on any given day. If you like that person, it's just crazy how baseball works out.
All right. So just to kind of pay off for this one, and we'll get into a couple more detail about a couple of these guys. I know the answer because we've talked this shit through a million times before. I want you to tell the audience, why did you pay so much for Sanchez today? Because he was crazy high expensive.
Crazy high expensive, way too expensive. So one, I stacked Yankees in a lineup I used with Eflin and Ross. This lineup, obviously, because of kind of the general reason why I use Sanchez is because they were all very expensive. Kind of too expensive for what they'd done, too expensive for how hitting had been in general. No one was going to pay up for him, at least not many people, especially with a guy like Max Scherzer on the slate, then a really good drop-down option and Mike Clevenger, both who were very popular. So I used Sanchez, and I kind of wrote this in the write-up. This is exactly, and we'll kind of give a little bit of a taste of the write-up to the public out here. So under catcher options, and I listed a couple of them, I said this about Sanchez. Crazy expensive at 5.2K, but if you can swing it in GPPs as a one-off or as part of a Yankees stack, God bless you. And that's literally what I meant by it. A guy like Sanchez, and Ryan, me and you talk about this all the time, he has by far the most upside at the catcher position because of something like he did today. And with how weak the catcher position is, we talk about that all the time. Sanchez at 5'2", Sanchez at 4'5". It doesn't really matter. He's got the most upside. I wanted to stack Yankees. I knew no one was going to go there because the price tag would take him off, and it just made sense for how I play.
So again, is trying to complement one another. And I feel like this works out better in baseball. And we brought it up with Mike Trout the other day as well. And even though he wasn't a slate changer like Gary Sanchez, I'm pretty sure he homered that night and was worth the money that you put into him. In basketball, if James Harden is 14K, it just becomes difficult for him. And he's never 14K. I get that, to really pay off that type of a salary. But in baseball, because of the home run, and one home run already puts you at value on almost any kind of price tag. 2 home runs puts you well over it. Getting people off of somebody because the price is so high and keeping that ownership low is huge. I mean, there was a night, this is before you even came on, random call, I called out JJ Hardy, not because I like JJ Hardy, because he was super cheap against a bad pitcher. And he goes double dong at like 1% ownership and like 5 customers win GPPs. Like, that is just the randomness that is baseball that causes you to win. Like in basketball, it's oftentimes a stack that goes to OT. But that's also randomness you can't predict. It's more unpredictable in baseball. And the low-owned plays that go off is what wins you big money.
Definitely. All really good points. And it's just price is almost, and it's weird to say this, but it's true to a certain extent. Price is almost like irrelevant in baseball. Like, it matters and it's a guide. But with how drastic they reward strikeouts and home runs, like look at a Robbie Grossman today versus an Aaron Judge, and that's kind of the example we talk about all the time. That does not happen in basketball. Whoever you talked about, like, Timothy Luwabu Cabarrot does not outscore Westbrook by 20.
I can't believe you choose a name that was that hard to say.
I know. I don't know why I did that. So I just couldn't think of any other. He's always the random player that comes to my mind. I have no idea why. So there's no chance he'll ever score 20 times more than Harden, ever.
Right. In order for Cabarrot to outscore Russell Westbrook or James Harden or Giannis or wherever the hell it is, one of those guys, he needs to get hurt. You know what I mean? Like, you're literally playing for a guy like that to get hurt. But Robbie Grossman outscores Aaron Judge 25% of the time.
Exactly. It's a much different game in that regard. And, talking about this now makes me kind of kick myself for not listening to this when I play basketball and football, because it's so easy and so much fun to be different in baseball. But they're just so much different.
Well, I would tell you to listen to something you actually told me the other day, that is just do you and worry.
Yes.
You'll naturally be different in basketball and football without even trying.
So that was a big part of today. So I spent a lot of this morning. Was not spending a lot of this morning creating lineups. As you know, I made the videos and I was doing a lot of research, and I wanted to wait for the lineups to come out before I, really dove into a major part of the write-up. And that took a while. So I was doing a lot of research. A lot of times I create lineups throughout the day, but that did not happen today. And my lineups just came organically. I mean, it must have only taken me 15 minutes to set my lineups, and I didn't make any changes to them, and they just fit. I don't know. I don't care if there was $400 left, $200 left in any of the lineups. I was happy with how they all looked.
All right. So you want to talk over a couple of guys, and I think the point for Clevenger was that you knew he'd be popular, and it wasn't that you disliked him. It's just that you happen to really like Eflin. Now, again, Clevenger was better. I mean, you're not going to sit around and hide from that. But you wanted to bring up the fact, you said things broke right. Clevenger got a little bit of an arm injury. He left the game early. Odds are, if he goes out there for another inning or two, you're about 35 grand in the hole from where you're sitting right now.
At least. And we talk about this all the time. It reminded me a lot of when I took down the basketball tournament and Porzingis got hurt. I mean, a lot like that. Clevenger was popular for a reason. He was really good. He only had thrown 75 pitches. There could have been a chance he had 15 more points in that game. And he was popular. That could have really brought me down. So I'm very thankful of that. I don't, brush that under the bridge. I acknowledge that.
And I think it's also, so I had a buddy I used to work with doing tech sales, and he was handed basically $1 million account, which is about $50K in commission every single year. And we would kind of pick on him a little bit because everybody say, well, why don't you have the same numbers Dan has? Well, Dan got handed $1 million account. My entire sales quota is $750K. If you hand me $1 million, I'll be up there. And I love what he said. He goes, yeah. He goes, I was really lucky to get that. That was really fortunate. He goes, I've also had my teeth kicked in doing sales for 20 years. For all the bad things that ever happened to me, this good thing happened. And that's kind of what I look at when something like that. For all the days your guy gets hurt, and think about who was the Cleveland Cavalier? Was it Chetty who went out on a monster basketball lineup you had a couple months ago?
Yeah, you remember.
Okay,
Sure.
so like you were whining and crying to me on Facebook about how he got hurt. And I mean,
that's like a nightly basis though.
Yeah, I know, but you remember getting really unlucky that day and appreciate the good luck you had this day, because there's going to be ups and downs. We've all been through them. It's just important to remember when something, fortunate breaks your way, because you've also lost a lot of money on bad luck.
Most definitely, man. It's important to acknowledge that. Yeah, it's definitely, you got to take the good with the bad and appreciate when things break your way.
All right. So you wanted to bring up George Springer for a reason. Was that just the lucky point that we kind of discussed already?
Yeah, like it kind of worked out both ways, just in the sense that he hit the most random bloop double. That was almost a triple that would have, taken me out of first. And then if he walks in the ninth inning, I lose my spot, but he ends up doing nothing. So it's just the gamut of emotions. And he was popular, and for good reason. I got it. But again, it's just and I was watching it, man. It was one of the more tilting at bats when he batted in the ninth inning I've watched.
I bet. I think we kind of covered the Aaron Judge thing already. The whole point behind that was just a simple fact that you can win baseball with a bad play. And that is one of the things I know you love about this game.
You were just talking about that yesterday.
I kind of enjoyed it as well. It's nice to know that you can screw up a pick but still do well. You can't do that in basketball or football. We've all won some GPPs before and, fun stuff like that. You got to nut every pick in football, or at least they have to all be at least average.
And the reason why is because it was something that you've kind of harped on me. It's home runs. In baseball, you need home runs, and home runs hide other things. If you get like a couple guys that hit home runs that no one else has, that bus booms you so much over the field. It's crazy. It's unlike anything else in DFS.
Exactly. So like yesterday's day slate during the day, I didn't do a very good job of picking pitchers. It was like the one slate all year where I screwed up pitching but had all my hitters right. Like I had 6 home runs in one lineup, which covered up all the fact that all the pitchers I took were not very good. I kind of hitched my wagon to Trevor Williams, who had a bad inning and ended up not being very good. So again, the home run is king in MLB DFS. And the fun part about switching to GPPs and not trying to be a conservative cash game player, just play for upside. It's more fun.
It is more fun. And, you're playing by your own rules, I guess how I like to put it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we've kind of covered all these points so far. Oh, Tyson Ross. I guess we were both just flabbergasted he wasn't like 10 times chalkier than he was, because he's a good pitcher and he was basically free today. Like I set 6 lineups today, which is twice what I normally do. And I used him, I think 5. I don't know how many times you used him.
That's why I used him in 2 or 3. I used 3 pitchers and I just mixed them up. But so for me, a couple points here. One, I mean, we like Ross, so I understand why you thought that. I couldn't believe he wasn't more owned. But the big point I want to bring up here is I talked to you about this before the show, but I kind of heard your voice, in my ear a little bit today, before I set my lineups, because I was hearing Ross going to be the most popular guy in the slate, most high-owned guy in the slate, like blah, blah, blah. And I was like, man, do I want to get off Ross? Like, you can't listen to what everyone says, though. You got to know, go by what you think. And I thought Ross was going to pitch really well today. I also took a step back and was like, even if Ross is chalky, like I'm using Eflin, who won't be chalky, and the Yankees stack, which is so damn expensive, they can't be chalky. So, I mean, it doesn't matter if Ross is popular, and he ended up not even being popular. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. I didn't really do it, but sure, I'll take some credit. All right, so just to talk ourselves up just for a few minutes, it's, ultimately pay our bills by getting new customers.
Yes.
It was a big weekend, and again, your bread and butter is MLB GPPs, finding ways to be different. And I think a good comparison is on Friday nights, we usually have like 15 games going, which means there's 30 different teams you can stack. And if there's a really popular stack that eats up, 20, 25, 30% of the ownership, and you go down to like the 4th most popular stack and they're 2, 3, 4, 5% owned, they're not, 1/12 is likely to succeed if you look at the ownership discrepancy. So Friday night, you hit up Arizona pretty hard, and you can look, a bunch of customers. Again, congratulations to Paul on winning the big money over there. Ricky, Michael, Zach, all you guys had big nights, based on what you put into it. So congratulations. We really do want to help people win, and we do, we play mostly who we talk about for the most part. And if you want to join the team, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, everyone that we talk about, we play, and it's very I don't know, baseball. I still don't think people have really like caught on fully yet. Like I'm thinking about Friday night and using Alex Avila and the Diamondback stack, who's like unowned. And we talk about how people love your stack, but people won't use like bottom of the lineup, like shitty guys. And I get that because he wants to roster those guys, but you have to, because if your stat goes off, those guys are doing something, and those guys are in better spots that night than a Mike Trout.
And also just the fact that sometimes you can eat a 0 or a 2 points or a 4 points if everybody else goes off. If Alex Avila or whatever scrub you want to think of at the bottom of the lineup lets you play everybody else that you love, you just hope he gets a bloop double. You know what I mean? Like, it can happen. It doesn't mean that he never gets hits.
Yeah, and another point that I didn't bring up to you yet, and before you go into this, so you also have to be willing, and I know you tell me this all the time, to be able to eat your lumps and not, expect to win every night. Last night, for instance, Saturday night, was an awful night. I went right back to Boston and Arizona. I like Mookie Betts a lot. He did nothing. Aaron Judge homered twice. It was an awful night, and that happens.
All right, so I want to talk over my last 4 days of MLB specifically, just because, I took a few things that you talk about all the time, and I just feel like maybe there could be, I don't know, hopefully some learning lessons there. So I don't play for enough money to show you guys anything worth talking about. I don't sit around and concentrate on my life. I just don't play for that much these days. And I also never got quite to the top. And we know how progressively GPPs, like, you got to get first or second. And sure, top 1% is good, but, getting 9th place out of 1,300, while that's great, it doesn't really give you much. But I had a top 1% finish in each day. I only play 3 lineups per day or per slate, with the exception of today where I did 2 separate 3-entry maxes. But what I want to talk about is I've mostly focused on GPPs this year, but on Thursday during the day, like we talked about it, I hated, there was nowhere I wanted to be different. I didn't want to get away from the chalk. So I played like 10 times what I normally play in cash games that day because I liked the chalk that day. You use the term slate dependent all the time. And if there's a day where you love the chalk, okay, don't be different that day. Play the chalk. If that means playing cash games, so be it. Just take the slate, let it come to you, and don't feel the need to stuff a bunch of money in it and be different if you like the chalky option that day.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm already it's really hard for me to play like that, but I couldn't agree with you more, and I wish I could play more like that. And I do view things as slate dependent, but my brain is just always trying to be different, and I wish that I could take my own advice a little bit more, to be honest.
And I don't know, you don't always do it, but you do say during the day sometimes, I might just sit this one out because I agree Coors isn't a great spot. And it is difficult to stack Coors and win a GPP because everybody's already stacking Coors. And even though you might not do it, this could be a situation where listen to what Matt says and not what he does. If you agree the chalk isn't a great spot and you don't want to go against it, sit it out or play cash games. You don't have to be different that day if you think the chalk is going to go off.
Couldn't agree more.
All right, so again, this is what we talk about. Play who you want. Be you instead of trying to follow, ownership and things like that, because it allows you to play free and loose. Last night, for example, I had a top 1% lineup because Alfaro, the catcher for the Marlins, and even though the pitcher for Atlanta was chalky, Alfaro is a decent hitter in the middle of the lineup and cheap. So I played him. He double dongs, and he himself, by himself, basically puts me in the money. Another thing that you've kind of really preached, and I've started to think of more and more, is yes, it's hard to ever know who they're going to go up against on a bullpen day or when it gets to the bullpen. But sometimes the starting pitcher's gone in 3 innings, and you might get 3 or 4 at-bats against the bullpen. And in baseball, you might only need the one because a 3-run homer is versus 18 points, and that's always a good day.
Some of these teams have really shitty bullpens, and some of these teams have really good bullpens, and that is something to definitely take note of. Like, more than take note of.
Yeah, it is something everybody should be tracking. And especially on a day where the starter maybe isn't great and you think there's an opportunity that maybe they'll get into the bullpen early. These 13-11 games, we're about to get into the Chicago Cubs-Milwaukee game from Friday night because I want to talk to you about how games can break out. Because for a lot of you who haven't watched as much baseball as we have in our lives, baseball's got a funky way of working out. What somebody does on one side can influence what the other side does. And I want to encourage everybody to examine the way they look at this game because you can do all the baseball research you want. And it's a small sample size. It only breaks out so many times.
In the Yankees game today, they ended up scoring big. Clint Frazier homered twice. And after a second home run, they brought in a position player to pitch. So that helped that Brett Gardner, got an extra walk or single or whatever it was. All that stuff matters. And we talk about, the win. And I was thinking about this today, because Eflin stayed in longer and got the win, over Berrios because Hoskins hit a 2-run homer that just got out. And it was just my day. Things were working out. We don't play for the win, and it's never smart to play for the win. But damn, it's nice when you get it.
Well, when you get to squeak something out like that, it sure
Yes.
is nice. I watched a lot of obviously my Brewers play the Cubs this week, and I think I caught all but a few pitches. And there was a lot of home runs in the series, but there was also a lot of deep fly balls. Wilson Contreras just muscled it just out barely over the fence today. I'm about to get into what happened to Orlando Arcia on Friday. Like a couple of feet here and there is going to directly affect how the next couple of innings might be played. If there's an 8-run lead by somebody, you talked about a position player coming in, or people bring in their worst bullpen pitchers, and then other guys have an opportunity to catch up.
Yeah, so Tim Anderson, who has been like a guy that kind of rode all weekend whenever he's played, has been amazing. He hit a ball that, and I messaged you about this, that it was gone. I mean, it was a home run, but Malik Smith brought it back into the park. He didn't catch it, but he got his glove on it and brought it back in and counted as a double.
That's -7 right there.
Yeah, you talk about a game of inches. I mean, that is tilting. When you're in the top of GPPs and stuff like that, how it happens, it is. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. It's tilting.
Yeah, I mean, much to the same. I lost 7 points right there. Like I said today, I got 22nd out of 1,300 in the GPP. You give me those extra 7 points, I'm probably in the top 10.
That's a big difference. Exactly. All that stuff adds up, and that's sometimes when you watch as much as we do, it becomes almost even more draining because you see all the little idiosyncrasies add up.
Yep. So also last night, I didn't do the same thing you did. My lineups worked out okay last night. I had different pitching, but you had kind of talked about Nick Ahmed the day before. So I was sitting decent in GPP, I think 8 times buy-in, and then Nick Ahmed got the single and scored the run to win the game. Well, that put me from 8 times buy-in to 27 times buy-in or whatever it is. One little thing can make such a big difference when you get up near the top like that. And it truly is a game of inches, which is why I want to talk about the game on Friday night, because I was really thinking about the game flow and the game script of this. And I know you didn't watch the Brewers-Cubs game because you kind of cruise around and watch other stuff.
I did watch a bunch of it, though, actually.
Okay. So I want to talk about some points. And this isn't just exclusive to this game. I was thinking about it as I was watching this. So the Brewers and Cubs game went off Friday night, 13-10. Lots of offense, lots of home runs, couple of stolen bases in there. But if you had looked at this game from the outset, we had good pitching, right? Not Max Scherzer, Jacob deGrom, but Brandon Woodruff is an up-and-coming stud. And Jose Quintana has regularly owned the Brewers in the past. So from a distance, you would have expected this one to be more 3-2 and not 13-10. But as we've been saying the whole day, that doesn't always work out in baseball.
From a distance, you're not really looking at bats. I like the Cubs here, but that was kind of an against the grain type of play. Looking at that game from a 30,000 foot view, as we like to say, on paper, neither of these teams were in great hitting spots.
No, not at all. And I had some exposure to this game, but I ran one of my 3 lineups as a Woodruff Quintana stack, because not only are those guys both pretty decent, but also last year, the Brewers and Cubs played exclusively low-scoring pitching matchups. It wasn't the case this weekend, but that's how it worked out every single game last year. So that was in the back of my mind. So watching this game in the first inning, Woodruff is pinpoint, and he looks like he's poised to have a great night. He hits every single glove in the first inning. Even the hit that he gave up, Zobrist hit a good pitch, laced it opposite field as he painted the corner. And I'm thinking, man, he looks good. Looks like my pitching lineup is going to be the one that's better. Well, then the Brewers get up, and Quintana is just awful. He just didn't have his stuff. He couldn't hit anything. He couldn't hit his spots. The first inning drags on forever. And we all know when this happens, right? How many times have you watched a pitcher pitch well, and then when he sits in the dugout for 30 minutes, he comes out and he's just not the same?
Yeah, man, that's not a big reason, but I generally don't like stacking my team with my pitcher for reasons like that, man. You want your pitcher out there crisp in a battle, not where his team's up runs, scoring a lot of runs. I'm with you, man. Bad situation for him, and that's just part of the game.
That happens all the time. Now, I just thought of that example from this game, and it's hard to control that, but I like the point that you just made. And that's just something that completely switched the way that the rest of this game worked out. Jose Quintana by himself, just not having his location that day, switched every single way the rest of this game broke. So, again, Woodruff kind of lost it.
Just to your point real quick, he was really bad. We've seen him before, and he was just really bad, couldn't locate. We talk about that all the time. He was awful.
So for the next couple of innings, Woodruff has good stuff, so he managed to get out of it with only really a 3-run home run that he gave up to Descalso. The Cubs hit a couple of hits into the shift, where the Brewers shifted and they found the open spots on him. and then he gives up a 3-run bomb to Descalzo. But because he kind of lost his stuff, like he had to labor through 4 innings. At that point, there was a big run discrepancy. So when there is a big run discrepancy, you tend to see teams. Yes, exactly. The bad relievers come in. And that's what happened for the rest of this games. The Cubs tossed up 5 runs in the 8th and the 9th inning against guys on the Brewers that legitimately I barely had ever heard of before. And while you're like, okay, well, it's just 5 runs. 5 runs is more than an average team scores in a game. And those were just like add-on, like late minute points. Or
Same
runs.
thing happened in Boston too. And it happens more than you think. And it's something that, it's hard to predict when that stuff happens. But that's why baseball is just such a different sport. Because like you said, I like how you put that. Jose Quintana being off changed the entire complexion of that game.
Right, exactly. And that's where I'm not trying to tell you that we're going to sit here and be able to predict who's going to be off, because that's just, you're not. Nobody can do that. I can't tell you if somebody's just not going to have their location today. Max Scherzer almost always has it. Bad pitchers rarely have it. That's just, you can't really know those things. But it's why you choose to go different, because on any given day, there is just a lot of randomness that goes into baseball because of the small sample size. A hitter only gets 4 or 5 at-bats in the game. That's a small sample size. Russell Westbrook can suck in the first half, and then he comes out and he's Russell Westbrook in the second half. And before you know it, he's ending the day with 58 DK points. Mike Trout, if he, the umpire blows the first at-bat, blows a couple of calls, then he pops out, and then he walks the next time. A walk's not awful because at least you get 2 points, but it certainly isn't good. It kills your upside for the day.
Yeah, it certainly isn't good, especially when you're rostering a guy like that. Especially at high ownership, a lot of people are going to own guys like that. And there's spots to use every player in baseball, but the idea of guys in must spots that are hitters is almost hogwash to me. I'm not saying that those guys won't succeed when they're in great spots. It's just there's so much power in being different.
If you constantly fade Mike Trout or Bryce Harper in crush spots, you're probably going to end up okay. If you constantly fade James Harden and Giannis Antetokounmpo in crush spots, you're going to just start giving your money away.
Yes, for sure. But the other part of that, like if you're fading Mike Trout and Bryce Harper and Coors and those crush spots, you better know what you're doing and, not just fade them to fade them. Because like you always say, like there's plenty of people who didn't use them that didn't do anything today.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, absolutely. No doubt about it. So again, going back to this game on Friday night, Orlando Arcia hits an opposite field 367-foot home run, bit of a wall scraper. That got the Brewers back their big lead, which went back to why the crappier relief pitchers started coming in. If that ball doesn't get out and it's a couple feet short and it gets caught, that again, it rechanges the complexion of this game, something that was just a couple of feet away. Again, you can't predict when people are going to hit wall scrapers, but what you can predict is the fact that baseball will continue to be random. That a couple feet and a couple feet here and a couple feet there is just really unpredictable. And why a guy at 2% ownership going off is not unusual, and why a guy at 50% ownership, doing nothing but getting you a double with no RBIs or runs is not unusual either.
And there's so many just random things in playing baseball. It's something that we talk about all the time, which we haven't brought up here, umpiring. So today, that Houston-Oakland game, like I had Grossman, but the guy also right behind me who had Springer had Grossman. So it was like negligible. And he also had Springer. So I'm like, the thing about baseball, if games go into, extra innings, even though if someone doesn't score, win, people are always getting points here and there because there's hits and walks. So I was dreading extra innings. I needed Houston to win that game right there. And count got 2-0 on Altuve with the bases loaded. And Trinan was in. And the next pitch was like almost right down the middle. Like not quite, but it was a strike. And he got called a ball. So I was like, wow, that thing's really playing well for me. And then the next pitch was almost in the same spot and called a ball. So it was a 4-pitch walk, and it easily could have been a 2-2 count.
Yeah, and that wasn't nothing that you did. There was nothing you could have any control over, but the umpires blow a lot of calls. And this is why if you hear me whining about the electronic strike zone and why it needs to be implemented like 5 years ago, is because part of it is it would just be better for the game to get the calls right. And the excuses is the way that we always done it is the dumbest thing I ever heard. But like this is constantly messing with DFS a little bit daily. But you're asking a guy to do an impossible job. And we watch a lot of this stuff. And it's kind of like what you just talked about. It puts hitters in weird situations.
Yeah, like the other thing is like they're talking about, today in the Seattle White Sox game, and it's all plays a part. There was a D. Gordon hit into a double play. It was like a 7-run game at that point in the 8th or 9th inning, but he was really safe, and they reviewed it, and he was called safe. Like all these at-bats, all these hits, like everything, this is these guys' livelihoods. These numbers like matter a lot. I think we're really doing an injustice with trying to have these, old white guys, say what's a ball or a strike. It just makes no sense to me, man. And I know that you've kind of gotten me on that side, but I'll never go back.
No, you're asking a human being to do an impossible job.
And we feel the same way, just real quick. Like, we don't blame the umpires. Like you just said, it's an impossible job. And do we wish they were a little bit better? Sure, we wish everyone was a little bit better at everything. It's more that their job's impossible.
Definitely. So the other side of this, so kind of like not really piggybacking off this game, but the flip side of it, and something that we do discuss a lot, is putting pitchers from the same game together. If you like both of them, not just to do it, but why, if you like both pitchers, it works. Because when you get into a pitcher's duel and this guy knows he can't give up a run, he's more likely to pitch for a strikeout. And strikeouts are king from the pitching perspective on DraftKings. If he can't give up contact because one run ruins things, it's different. If your guy's up 8-0 and it's the 5th inning, he's just pitching to contact, just trying to cruise through the game. Get a couple runners on, now he'll start tightening it up. But at this point, if he's up 8 runs, he knows I can deal with contact. Let's just get them through this game and just let them hit into their outs. I don't need to be perfectly fine.
Big difference, man. Strikeouts are king. Strikeouts and home runs, you need them. There's just no other way about it. I mean, look at Scherzer today. Washington got up huge. He didn't need to be like the Scherzer that was the dominant Scherzer. He was still fine and he was good, but you hardly needed him to win a tournament today. I mean, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
What's up with your boy Wheeler, though?
I'd say he's great trade bait right now for anybody who wants to go buy him early. You know how it is. Some guys just don't have their location the first couple times out, so I'm not scared yet.
I feel that. I'm glad that you're staying tight on that.
Right. I mean, Max Scherzer gave up a bunch of runs today. Does that mean you're going to go sell him? No. It's early. I would say I'd caution people in their year-long fantasy not to overreact, good or bad, on anybody. Tim Anderson's not going to bat 500 all year.
He looks good, though. I will say to your point, one thing that's not an overreaction, Kluber is the 4th best starter of the Indians right now.
Yeah, good staff, and he's not garbage. He just isn't what he used to be.
No, he fell off kind of big time last year, and the other guys have stepped up. So it was like already a conversation, and the other guys look like really good. In comparison, Kluber does look pretty bad compared to those guys.
Definitely. So I guess the key thing that we want people to take out of this video, and the hardest thing to do, because for me, a guy who looks at a lot of numbers, who's really analytical in his approach to things, it's difficult for me to look at a guy, because I play a lot of, obviously, basketball and football where it's different, and look at Mike Trout in a crush spot and just think, well, not today, not going to do it. Because the numbers and all the logic and all the common sense, the KISS method, Occam's razor, whatever you want to call it, all tells you to play that guy that day. But it's such a small sample size, it doesn't always work out. It doesn't work out a lot. There's none of that
in baseball. And yes, this is just how we view it so differently and how we play so well. There is no Occam's razor play in baseball, because the best guy succeeds 1 out of every 3 times. Like the best guy.
Exactly. Now, again, don't get me wrong. If there's a day where you think the Rockies are at home against a junky right-handed or left-handed pitcher and you want to attack them, that might make sense that day. And if that's the case and they're chalk and you love it, fine, just roll with it that day. But know that it's probably maybe just play cash games that day. I focus way more on GPPs in this sport than I do the other ones, but I went really heavy cash game on Thursday during the day slate because I really liked the chalk that day and I felt really comfortable with my lineup. I liked who was the pitcher from Glass now over Flaherty, and that 5 or 6 extra points helped. And I like the Dodgers because they just made so much sense. Every other slate this weekend, I just did whatever I want and just kind of, went with lower owned guys if I liked them. Just you do you.
Yandy Diaz was really good for you on that slate too.
Yeah, exactly.
He's been really good.
Yes, he has. We've only brought him up like 9 times in 10 days.
Yeah, I got another kind of cheap guy tomorrow to bring up. I'm excited about. So that's the other thing, man. And I was funny. My wife, as you know, she is along for the ride always, but she doesn't understand this stuff. But she's like, realizing that it's getting close, and she's asking me, and it's finally happening. And she's like, what are you gonna do tomorrow? And I'm like, I already can't wait for the next slate. Like that's just how my brain works. She's like, you're nuts.
Yeah. It's a little bit different. So again, guys, we cannot reiterate enough. And it took me a couple years of playing baseball to I guess that's the best way to put it. Really to confident. I don't even know how I want to phrase this the best way, but to like have the nuts or the balls or the stones to be like, okay, yeah, I get it. Harper might be in a good spot today. Goldschmidt might be in a good spot, but I don't like him enough to think like he's a must play. And what does a chalky guy need to do to like ruin your day? Like get 2 home runs? You know, as long as you get the guys that you like and make the lineup that you like, I don't ever try to be concerned with who's chalk in the day unless I just know like Coors Field or like a really good pitcher in a really good spot.
Yeah. Again, it's just so different. It is different. It's hard to kind of readjust your brain when you've been playing football and basketball, and they're just so much different. We try to do our best to talk about it. I guess just practice makes perfect.
Right. If Todd Gurley is going up against the worst run defense in football, and this is pre-CJ Anderson, and it's, you know, whatever, the weather's cooperating and the game script and the spread and everything like that makes sense, he succeeds 9 out of 10 times. Mike Trout against a bad pitcher does not succeed 9 out of 10 times, not even close.
Yeah, precisely.
So, all right, guys, thanks a lot. Congratulations, Matt. That's a nice little day. Good for you. Happy for you. And for all the other customers who had big weekends, that's awesome, guys. Way to go. And we'll be back at it tomorrow.
Yep. Thanks, guys.